Welcome back to X-Raised, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. If you've been with us for a while, today's episode will feel familiar but a little different. Laina Chan is back with us, award-winning barrister, CEO of MiAI Law, and someone we regularly turn to when the conversation shifts to AI, judgment, and how technology actually fits into professional decision-making. Joining her today for the very first time here on X-Rays is Anderson Wong, Principal Solicitor and Notary Public at Aristo Lawyers, a multi-practice firm serving a diverse international client base. Anderson is here to share what it looks like to use AI in real legal work, where accuracy and responsibility really matter. So today, we're not asking what AI can do. We're asking what it changes in how professionals think, decide, and stand behind their advice. Hi, Lena. Happy to have you back.
Hi, Miles. Hi, Anderson.
Hi, Anderson. Welcome to our community. It's great to have you with us.
Hi, Miles. Hi, Lena. Thank you for inviting me to this.
Oh, I'm loving the accent, Anderson. Let's get. I'm like, ooh, thank you for being with us. So let's get straight into it. Anderson, as a principal solicitor, what challenges in your day-to-day legal research first made you realize there had to be a very smart, more reliable way to work?
Um, I think, well, people will need to understand a bit about my background I run a boutique firm in Sydney, and I do in general practice of laws that I do conveyancing, property, commercial dispute, and also litigation with like retail lease ad or different kind of area of law. So when it comes to running a business with a law firm in this way, every day we come to a challenge that our brain, our logic, it keeps changing, flipping around different area of law, how to explain to the client how the legislation goes for, how the laws in Australia go for. And when it comes to legal research, we need to think about what's the client expected and what the law actually tells the client what they should do so. And in the traditional legal way, at least for me, the lawyers will go through the textbook, go through the online, based on your knowledge to advise a client. We spend time on like lights or like over the weekends to, update our own library to understand what's changes, what's the knowledge that we need to keep an update. But in reality, sometimes we are loaded up with a lot of different works. And when we rely on the traditional way to do the research, back then it spent a lot of time, which sometimes it start from where that you believe it's correct, because lawyers sometimes it's also human beings. They wants to give us the less time to bring up the answer to the client, or sometimes even the client keep chasing. But it comes to a time that when you don't have sufficient time to do the research and you rely on your own knowledge that you thought it is correct, then sometimes you would challenge yourself saying, is it the correct direction? Is it the accurate advice that you gave to that client? And it comes to a point that I think about whether my way of doing the legal research and the time that I spend is sufficient and accurate. And I think now the AI is coming, it helps a lot of lawyers or people to do the research. Even sometimes a client come to us with some AI answer telling us, oh, this is from the AI. The AI told me that they should do it this way. But they are the client, and we are the lawyers who need to keep on questioning, because we were trained to be questions on the law, questions on the legislation, questions on the client, the information provided by the client. And it comes to the way that we need to direct the client. Is it the correct starting point that we think about this legal questions? And is it this correct starting point how we start to structure our advice to the client? And AI, especially for MiAI, it helps us to think about how a counsel, how a solicitor should start from the beginning to the end, how it comes to the conclusion.
Mhm. I think that's a familiar pressure point, Anderson, when research stops being about insight and starts becoming like a bottleneck. Everything downstream feels it.
Anderson works really late. He's emailing me at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
And, even with I know there's a fear from some lawyers that AI is going to replace the lawyer, but I don't see that. And I think that what Anderson has said maybe supports that because, we're only one person, right, Anderson? And we can't know all of the law. We can't have all of the law at our fingertips. And clients ask us questions all the time that we don't necessarily know the answer to. And in order to research the answer to the point where actually we're giving good advice takes a lot of time. It's just impossible for the lawyer to hold all the information in their head. And using a system like ours, which is what Anderson uses, I think helps make us not only more efficient at finding the answer, but makes the advice that we give, I think, safer and more reliable. Because I mean, Anderson does the research and he doesn't, I assume he checks it. I assume he checks all of the research reports that he gets. He doesn't just, I hope, you don't just read the research reports and use it without checking the sources. But even doing that, I think that MiAI Law would give the lawyer more confidence that when they actually advise the client, that they're advising from solid ground. Is that right, Anderson?
Yes, I totally agree. Like, because as Naila mentioned, it's something that's very crucial. It's like even with the source that come from all the AI tool and even from my AI law, I always check it, and all the lawyers should always check it. It's not just to rely on the conclusion or the result, but we also need to check whether it is right and what's the judgment it comes from. It's correct and accurate, and it also help us to build on more confidence on the result that we bring to the client. Especially, I told Leila last week that my AI actually saved me because as what Naila mentioned, the client keep on asking some question. It's outside my general practice. Like as I mentioned, I don't really practice criminal law, but even client commercial dispute, they asking some questions about criminal law as it whether it is they can go to the police and to ask the prosecutor to prosecute the other side. It is something that beyond my knowledge,
Specialty.
but the clients keep asking. And as a general, like a solicitor who working in general practice, we can't, as Leila said, we can't hold all the information. But my AI lawyer helped me to keep on researching on the criminal acts, the legislation about the criminal points. It helped me to build the knowledge and also to provide the confidence on how to structure a correct advice to the client that the client wants to understand. At the same time, the lawyer learn about the legislation as well.
Mhm. Right. We can only take too much as a human being. And it obviously makes the work of my AI laws users, the lawyers in this case, Anderson, more efficient. And as you said, Lena, it gives a more reliable answer to the questions, especially as you said, Anderson, not everything is your specialty. In this case, the criminal law, when in fact it's a corporate dispute. What has surprised you most about how lawyers actually use my AI law in practice compared with how you actually expected they would use it when you were designing it?
When I started thinking about this problem, which was it 2 years ago?
Yeah,
Was it
2 years ago, roughly two
Yes.
years ago.
Right, right. When I was just thinking about this 2 years ago, I was just thinking of it in terms of research, of being able to unearth the knowledge, which is part of what Anderson uses it for and what we use it for as well. But now I think we're evolving to becoming a source of truth so that we have the contract review features where people are uploading their contracts to check whether the contracts will stand up in a court of law. But also, Anderson hasn't seen this yet, but we've been beta testing our law check feature where you can upload a document, a legal document, and then we will extract all the legal propositions and then check it against the law to see whether the propositions actually are accurately stated or whether they've been inflated or whether the authorities that they are relying upon are accurate. We're checking for hallucinations, etc. And what's really interested me is that the courts, the New South Wales Court of Appeal, the judges have indicated to me that they are interested in such a feature. And then off the record, a federal court judge has also indicated that that would be the kind of feature that she would be interested in because there are so many litigants in person now who have access to AI. And so then they're using the AI to generate their submissions. And even lawyers are saying, clients are coming in and producing AI generated letters or advices or whatever it is that AI is doing. And then they expect the lawyers to be able to instantaneously tell them whether the AI generated documents are accurate or not. And so what we have done is like sort of like an antidote to all this AI generated material so that you can upload it into MiAI Law and then we will check whether these documents are accurate. So what's interesting for me is that that is what we're evolving to, so that we see ourselves as becoming the source of truth. Because it's not that nobody can put their hands on AI, right? Everybody can use the free ChatGPT, Gemini, DeepSeek, whatever it is. And they all generate answers, which all look very persuasive, don't they? They sound good. But you don't, but it's that experience you bring as a lawyer when you look at those documents where you go, well, okay, that's sort of right, but you wouldn't use it in this scenario. Or or this proposition is sort of accurate, but it's a bit exaggerated. It's not quite right. And this case doesn't really stand for that proposition, etc. So I think we're evolving to becoming that source of truth. And that wasn't what I was thinking of 2 years ago, because 2 years ago, AI was just very new.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So source of truth. That's big. And I'm excited to hear more about the evolution of MiAI Law, Laina. And I remember, the gap between intention and real world use, I remember was one of the things that you highlighted in one of our episodes. It's often where the most important learning happens, especially with technology. And so, Anderson, once MiAI Law became part of your workflow, could you tell us what changed most noticeably, not just in speed, but in how you think about a matter or test your own assumptions?
Yes, I think well, obviously when AI comes, especially my AI comes in, it helps me and all the works more efficient and quicker. But I think what really changed is how me as a lawyer to approach a matter from the beginning. Like when a client comes to ask me about illegal questions, most of the time we rely on our own knowledge and we thought that the answer is correct and we give it to the client, especially when there's a limited of time for us to answer the client's questions. But what my AI Law changed is that it changed how we think, how I think from the beginning, how I should direct the legislation, how to understand the matters and the questions before I present to the client. So, because it helps us to save a lot of time on textbook research, but it saved me the time that it's not just to produce the answer quickly to the client, but it saved the time for me to do a further deep analysis of a matter to the client and in different direction that I previously thought it was correct. But actually, my AI give me alternative pathway that I should think about the legislation, think about the case before I present it to the client. And I think that it's very different to back then that we only have limited time to spend on a textbook and go with one direction. But in now, where I have more time to spend on doing more analyze with my AI Law, I can back to the way that acting as a lawyer from the beginning that I keep asking questions to my AI Law. I keep asking whether it is correct, whether it is the correct pathway. It tests my questions, it tests my assumption, and I know that okay, all this assumption is incorrect or there is false, and I can have better position to give the advice to the client or ask them for more information before I come to a conclusion, instead of just relying on my knowledge that I thought it must be correct and find a case to support my answer to present it to the client. It goes from the beginning instead of from the end.
So now do you feel calmer, more confident, less anxious?
Definitely. Because like all the answer it provides from my AI, it's not just comes to the conclusion, it comes to reasoning that, oh, I know where the judgment come from, I know where the reasoning come from, I know what the judge is talking about. It's more details than back then. I only got the conclusion and provide to the client.
So, Anderson, I met Anderson years ago because he briefed me when I was a barrister. I mean, we still work on matters together.
Uh-huh.
So now do you feel like I'm always there holding your hand, Anderson?
Yeah.
You must feel
You do,
great,
right?
Laina.
Because
I
we've
mean,
been working
hearing.
together for a long time. And then,
Uh-huh.
so, and Anderson would call up and ask questions. Now he doesn't have to call me specifically. He can just ask my AI law the questions.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly like AI. Like, because as I mentioned before that, my AI is just like the brain from Layla. So previously, I might be shy, not disturbing Layla because she's very busy. Now I just put a question to my AI. She's like another Layla helping to answer my questions.
So it's like a duplicate of Laina.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
as
that's
she would
what
always say, no, it's better. It's a better version of me. She would always
it's
tell
better
me.
because what we have done is now I haven't taught it to think like me. What I've taught it to is how to think like a lawyer because normal chat GPT, etc., they do lots of reasoning jumps, reasoning leaps. They would take
Mm-hmm.
a bit of information from a law report and then they would just collapse reasoning or draw inferences that it shouldn't. Whereas I spend all my time coding it into my AI law that you cannot make, A plus B does not equal C. A plus, A plus because the language model left to itself would come to lots of conclusions that a
Yeah.
lawyer wouldn't come to based on the raw information it's given. So I spend a lot of my time constraining my AI law to think
Mm-hmm.
not like a regular lay person, but to think the way a lawyer would think. So it's not actually my reasoning. It's not my reasoning, but given the information, given the cases, given the ratio or the principles each particular cases, I tell it, these are certain conclusions you cannot draw because a lawyer would not think like that.
Mm-hmm. So, Anderson, my AI law makes you less anxious, or not even anxious, less stressed, most importantly. And, going back to your answer earlier, I can relate to that. I mean, not being a lawyer, of course, but I like the challenge of testing your own thinking. Like, as for me, when I use any AI tool, it's less about getting answers faster, it's more about getting them better. And speaking of which, there's a lot of talk about AI making lawyers faster, right? Where do you think, Lena, speed actually becomes dangerous in legal work?
I think it just makes you faster at the because it removes the drudgery. It removes us sitting there having to, troll through a million textbooks to find that one footnote that might have the case that's relevant to the problem we're dealing with. My AI law gets you to the source quickly. It cuts out all the in-between steps. But we still have to read the case. We still have to check that the ratio that we say is the case, that the case stands for is still the case. And then we still have to think through the strategy that we had come up with. And then, as Anderson said, because my AI law unearths new lines of arguments, like a Silk, Danny Feller had said that, and it's on our website. He said my AI law unearthed lines of arguments that he hadn't even thought of himself. And so then we have to then think about all the new options that we have for strategy, and then to work out which strategy will best fit the client's purpose. So
Mhm.
in that sense, it hasn't sped anything up. In fact, it's given you more options and you have to think more. So what it has done, I think, is reduce the drudgery part of the work to leave you more time to actually reflect on all the different possible options that you have that you can advise your client to go down, and then you have to work out which is the best way, or which one or two ways that you might say to the client, here are the options, and we advise that, A and B might be best. C and D is possible, but I don't recommend you go down that path. So more time has to be spent doing that. And I think it's more time now spent than you would have spent before, because in the before you didn't even realize all these other options were available to you.
Mhm. And that's such a clear distinction, Lena, I think, because speed sounds like progress until it quietly starts cutting corners we don't even notice. So, has MiAI ever slowed you down in a good way, Anderson, forcing you to rethink something you might otherwise have glossed over?
Yes, I just think it's definitely that it slowed me down in a good way that when clients come, they always want a quick answer, but my AI give us the answer first, but at the same time, what I think AI always become, it's in a dangerous way, it's always, as you asked Layla, about the speeding, because it's very dangerous because making people less skeptical. It makes people think that the answer they produce is correct. But my AI, they not just provide I think me the answer. It provide all the list of questions how a lawyer should think first, and it comes to the reasons and the result. But at the same time, it shows to the lawyers, so to me, how it actually thinks, and it gives me time to think whether the questions that runs through the system it's also correct or not, and it gives me times to understand what's the core questions, to think about it, to test it, to challenge it, even from the result from my AI. I don't ask it only once. I keep asking like 3 to 4 times from different angle before I come to a conclusion and think it is accurate before I go to the client and tell the client that I'm confident, the confident answer that I have. So I think it did slow down for me to think more rather than I keep on relying on my uh, answer that I thought it is standard, not even on the legal research, but also when I draft the contract, because there's a contract review and audit function on my AI law as well. A lot of lawyers use template to start with the structure and start with the drafting. And we always thought that all the common costs in the template contract, it's standard, it's correct. But in fact, the law changed from time to time. And like it's sometimes that previously it's standard if you thought that it is correct and no issue, but in fact there was a new legislation come in or new judgment comes in, which it's um right overriding the previous so-called standard for the lawyers in the contract. So when we present the contract that we thought it is standard to the client and they use them, adopt the contract, it actually is very dangerous. But my AI law slow us down to understand that what's the legal consequence or what's the rationale for each cost under contract. It cost check with the judgment if there is any new cases that actually override or overturn the cost. It helps us to update our library and also remove all the doubts about what you present into the client before we make the conclusion.
Mhm. Well, that's very interesting for me. And I like what you said that it fixes and customizes the answers based on how a lawyer should think. Sometimes, because sometimes the most valuable tool isn't the one that accelerates you, I mean, that makes you really fast, but the one that makes you pause, as you said. And I remember, Lena, you often talk about first principles reasoning and in a legal context, what does that actually mean? And why does it matter even more when AI enters the picture?
First principles reasoning is important because for us, we really are evolving into becoming the source of truth. And our source of truth are the cases and the legislation, right? I mean, that's the law. So we can only be that source of truth because we do first principles reasoning, because we only rely upon the primary cases, and because we only rely upon the legislation. We've gone back to basics, and we don't rely upon what other people say the cases mean. We don't rely upon what other people say the legislation means. We retrieve the cases, we retrieve the legislation, we read through the legislation, we work out what the legislation, how the legislation affects the particular problem we're working on. We work everything out from first principles. And I think it's because we do that that we can be confident that when we were checking the contracts to see whether it stands up in the court of law, we're checking correspondence or submissions, etc., to see whether they're accurate. We know, or we can be comfortable that our reports are reliable because we are always only checking against the primary source of truth, which is the cases in the legislation.
Mhm.
Everything that we do is built on that.
Yeah, first principle reasoning and MiAI Law as the source of truth, as you said, because you rely upon the legislation. Sorry, I had to repeat that because it's really a good one. It reframes AI from being a shortcut